Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for tuning into another episode this week. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen, and this week I'm really excited to be joined by a special guest who I'm excited to have on the podcast for the first time. Somebody who I've followed his work, and he does a lot of great stuff, does a lot of, has a strong presence on social media. And a lot of people know him as Napheesa Collier's husband, Alex Bazzell. Alex is a skills trainer for the NBA and WNBA. He does a lot of good work with a lot of NBA and WNBA players. He's co-founder of Through the Lens. And he's, if you're not following him, on Through the Lens and the work that they're doing there, at least follow him on social media. He's a great follower, or a great follow on social media. And, he's somebody that's very knowledgeable about the game. And it's cool to see see his work and see all the different videos and the different kind of behind the scenes look to what goes on behind the scenes a lot of times with players, and the training that goes into just them doing what they do and being able to continue to play at a high level and be professional athletes. A lot of good work from Alex, and I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. As you'll hear in a little bit, a lot of really good insight, not only with the work he's doing, kind of he talks about the mental aspect of the game for athletes. And then, we talk about the WNBA, and, we really do kind of take a deep dive into, the Lynx. He has a unique view on the Lynx because, he has somebody who's directly tied into the team. Obviously, Napheesa Collier is off to a phenomenal start in 2023. He kind of talks about, her involvement in the team, her role on the team, how it's kind of expanded, not only this year, but throughout the years. Talks about the Lynx in general, where they're at right now. Talks a little bit about what they could do in the future. And then, one of my kind of the things that I was looking forward to in this podcast was talking about what the process was like for not only him, but Napheesa Collier herself in getting her body back, getting her back into game shape after giving birth a little over a year ago. So we talk about all of that. It's a lot of great insight from Alex on the process of all of that. He mentions in the podcast at one point they didn't know if Napheesa Collier would ever get back to the level that she was at. And not only has she done that, but she's excelled that, and she continues to grow in 2023. So a really good conversation with Alex, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. But without further ado, let's jump right in and get into this week's podcast with Alex Bazzell. Alex, how you doing, man? Thank you for joining me.
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I was just talking to you before we started recording that, I've continued to want to try and find different ways to get different voices, get different viewpoints on the game. So I appreciate you joining and kind of getting that different aspect or kind of different side of the game. Maybe I don't want to say outsider view of the game, but you know what I'm saying. Kind of have a different perspective of the game. So I appreciate you joining and taking some time out of your schedule to jump on.
Absolutely.
Well, first, if you could maybe just for the listeners, kind of to give a background in yourself. I'm familiar with you and your work, but if you don't mind, just kind of jumping into things with you and kind of talking a little bit about you and everything that you're doing.
Sure. My name is Alex Bazzell. I been in basketball for my entire life. Played it collegiately. Played overseas for a year. I really made my mark in the professional side on the training realm. So working with first building out an academy in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm from, to training some of the top NBA, WNBA players in the world, really starting back in 2014. So I got into that space just by happen to know a guy. Kyle Korver was in the NBA at the time. His youngest brother, Kirk, was my roommate and best friend in college at UMKC. And that is how I met Kyle. I never worked with Kyle on court, but I've known him for years. But Doug McDermott was a mutual connection there. So Doug was the first client I ever had in the NBA. He was at the Chicago Bulls coming off his rookie season. So that is how I really like broke into the NBA. Trained him for free for a number of years just to kind of prove that I could help him and get in my foot in the door. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed into working with a number of different athletes on both sides. Fast forward, I met Kobe Bryant in 2017. He asked me to move out to LA in 2018. So I began working closely with him and his daughter Gigi and their team. So it was an interesting time for me where I got to learn basketball from, in my opinion, the greatest basketball savant that's ever lived. And, from that, I learned so much on the business side of sport. And that is really where I'm most thankful for the relationship I built with him. And, of course, we went through a pretty horrific tragedy in 2020, and then COVID hit shortly thereafter. And sorry, I lost my AirPod. And I launched a media company with Carmelo Anthony back in mid 2020 called Through the Lens. So our mission was pretty simple. We want to help athletes tell their stories. We wanted to create a platform that was mutually inclusive of men and women. And we wanted to just get stories out there and help athletes understand the value of owning the data behind their users. So that is really what I've been up to the last 12 years in a nutshell. And it's kind of led me to all these things. And I think most notably, the title I'm probably most known for in the WNBA community is I am Napheesa Collier's husband, which is something that I'm very proud of course. So I'm happy to sit here and talk to you and talk about the Lynx a bit.
Yeah, that was kind of that. That's not the only reason I reached out to you, but that's one of the reasons I reached out to you to jump on the podcast was that connection to Fee. What, if you could kind of take a step back and kind of give the listeners an insight of how did you guys meet, how that kind of relationship start up.
Sure. So we met after her freshman year at UConn. At the time, so we're both from the St. Louis area. She grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, and she moved to St. Louis in high school. So I actually began training her after her freshman year at UConn. And then fast forward, we started dating during her senior year at UConn. So we became very tight, of course. And at the time I was living up in New York. So it was a pretty easy drive for me to go from there to Storrs, Connecticut. And at the time I was building out my, NBA roster quite a bit extensively. And we just clicked right on so many levels. And we've always been a great balance for one another because yes, like with any athlete I work with, I'm always very cognizant of everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's driven in different ways individually of what they want to accomplish and team goals. So, where we probably clicked the most was most people may not know, Fee isn't like a die-hard, let me sit here and consume basketball 24 hours a day. She has an incredible balance of work life. Of course, she's as driven as any athlete I've been around, but she has the ability to kind of switch it off, which is extremely healthy mindset where I wasn't able to do that. And I'm still not able to do that at times. I love basketball and that's all I want to talk about at times. So we actually are a great balance and equalizer for one another. And so that's really where our relationship formed. And I tell everyone now that, whenever we're on court, that's kind of like the hour of control I get to have per day in our relationship. And the other 23 hours, she pretty much runs the show here. So it's been a hell of a ride. And obviously I'm really excited with what she's been able to accomplish in her short time in the W.
Yeah. What do you think of what, I mean, she's only in her fifth year. I mean, I kind of consider it fourth year because last year was kind of, only playing 4 games, but
yeah,
what, not even just specifically with the WNBA, but what she's done to her career in this point. I mean, what she accomplished at UConn is remarkable as well. But what do you think of her career and you've kind of had a front row seat to all of that?
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, she's been probably underestimated every step of the way because her style of play doesn't pop off. right? The same way another, Enrique or Jewel or even like in Asia, very fundamentally sound, very hard worker, does all the little intangibles well that you can't even see on a stat sheet at times. Um, but for me, I always kind of knew she was different. I've worked with some of the top players in the world on the men's side too. And what I tell everyone is the main separator is just having a knack and having just this feel for the game that sometimes you can't even teach, right? Like I want to be very clear on she's been around a lot of great coaches. She's been around a lot of great, people that have helped her off the court outside of myself before I started working with her. And she just has such an innate feel for the game and instincts that you can't really teach it. It's instilled at a very young age. And I think that is often overlooked because of there's not like a highlight reel that's going to jump off the page. So to me, she's got kind of a Tim Duncan-esque part of her game in that way, where you're just like at the end of the season or at the end of a career, whatever it is, you're like, shit, she's been putting up pretty ridiculous numbers. And, you can see now the advanced metrics help someone like her, but it's kind of hard to quantify at times. So I'm not surprised by it. I've been very vocal, of course, of, just being a husband and being biased, but you know, from the time I was watching her at UConn, I knew she was going to hit the league and hit it running very, very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing too that I've noticed with just being around her for the 5 years or whatever that she's been in the WNBA is not only is she a great athlete, but she's a great person. She's very humble. She's very grounded. She's not a this might sound like a knock on other star players, but she doesn't have that persona about her. She doesn't have that kind of, I don't want to say it's cockiness, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's some players that carry themselves that way, and she's not like that at all, which is it's great for not only a leader of a team, but a face of a league. And that's been one thing that's definitely stood out to me. Over a little over a year now, you guys also had a big milestone too together, having your daughter Mila, correct?
Mila, yeah.
Mila, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What was that like? What's it like being a parent?
Well, it's the biggest blessing in the world, first and foremost. But I tell everyone I'm taking credit for the Lynx landing Diamond Miller because I took Fee out for that season. But no, I think that more than anything, it was kind of a shocking just revelation that women have to go through what they go through, and then compound that with an athlete trying to make her way back. It was not easy for her. And I think that she's made it look very easy, but there's times she really struggled. There's times where, she didn't even know if her body was ultimately going to bounce back. She went through a lot of knee issues. She went through a lot of back issues and hip issues. And I think that is the biggest thing that I'm probably most proud of. I mean, we got to a point in January where we didn't know if she was ever going to return to the form or level she needed to. She just didn't have any pop. She couldn't lift on any fadeaway. She couldn't do the simple things that we kind of have taken for granted. And I think when you compound that with, we've lived in New York the last couple off seasons, with just what she has to go through to get basic care, from rehab 45 minutes over here to showing to the gym an hour over here and then an hour and a half home, where you're now sitting in the car, sitting in traffic. There's just certain things that the women don't have. That's a kind of a necessity that the NBA players have. You kind of just take for granted, even PTs being, present after workouts. Like every NBA player has that. And I think that is where I would love to see, the WNBA get to for their players, that she's had to figure out on her own, all off her own dime. And I think that's probably what I'm most proud of. Sure, I'm very proud that she's accomplishing what she's accomplishing on the court, but just the relentlessness to get back to that level. You just can't describe it. And, of course we have a lot of content that we've captured, which we'll be releasing, but it was just such a incredible journey. And that's probably, again, that's why I'm most proud of now what she's been able to do, what she's doing.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that journey, if you don't mind, just the process of getting her back into game shape and just kind of getting back into form. What was that
Mhm.
whole process like? And like you said, it was kind of a bumpy ride with not really knowing if she'd return to form.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had to communicate quite a bit with Chuck, who's obviously the lead trainer with the Lynx, and developing a plan because when she came back initially, she was trying to do too much too early, and then you had to shut her down for 2 or 3 weeks to get her back to neutral. So that was probably the biggest challenge. I think she's been on record saying this. She shouldn't have returned last year, but she did because of Sill. And I think that goes back to your testament of what kind of person and teammate she is. But she wasn't anywhere close. And I'm just thankful she got through that without injury. And then once we got to the off season, it was just a balance. We had to start with 15-minute workout, and not because of stamina, just because of her body and overloading her joints too quickly. Um, and there's certain elements of even her breastfeeding that her body wouldn't return back to the normal, quick twitch muscles and all those things that you need as an athlete. It just took much longer than we both anticipated. So it was just a slow buildup. And then, we probably went 2 months where there was just a lot of uncertainty of what she would get back to before ultimately even getting to training camp. There was still some question marks of where was her body. We felt really good about her shot, her skills. Like we were able to hone in on that a bit more. But as you know, like you have to be an athlete and you have to perform at a top line level. So it was just kind of a balance and a struggle. And there'd be times where we just shut down for a week just to shut down and take it slow because it is a long off season. So it's the mental battle that she had to go through. Um, Again, you just can't really explain, but that was something that we always talked about. But from a skills perspective, I'm really happy with what she's accomplished. I think there's a couple elements that we really tried to hammer home. First and foremost was just her shooting, getting her more comfortable shooting. Not just like she's always been able to make shots, but I think it's the mental flip that she's had this year of being okay shooting 18 times or 22 times in a game and potentially only making 6 shots, right? Like that's something she's never been okay with because she's been so team oriented. But I think for her to take that next step is, I'm a big believer that if you want to win a championship, you have to have a top 5 or 6 player in the league. It's just
Mhm.
the proof is there over time. And she has the ability to it. But the next step for her was that mental flip of knowing that I need to be more aggressive. I need to be more assertive. I need to be okay failing. I need to be okay taking the last shot and missing it and us losing the game. And I think that is the biggest hurdle that we went from last year to this year with.
Yeah, I know she's even talked about it in post-game press conferences a few times. Like, well, so first of all, they played a back-to-back against Seattle earlier in the year, and that first
Mhm.
game she had a career high 33 points. She got asked post-game if she could hit a game winner, or she was asked about, I think it was her kind of like mid post fadeaway that she hit like towards the end of the game against the first Seattle game. She said that
Mhm.
that's her shot. If she could hit a game winner, it would be that shot. Well, what happens 2 nights later? She hits a game winner, hitting that exact same shot. But
Right.
she's talked about too with just being more aggressive. That's something that she's focused on to take her game to the next level. And that for any player kind of now taking the reins over officially, she's always kind of been that player or that caliber of player, but now officially taking the reins, that's very key. And that's definitely, you can definitely tell, throughout the year that she's definitely done that, and she's continued to focus on that area.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on, knowing where you guys started at, post birth, and kind of where that whole journey began? What are your thoughts on, where she's at right now? And I mean, she's playing at a MVP caliber play. What do you think of her season so far?
Yeah, I mean, her season's been outstanding. And I think it's funny, like we talked about this the other day. She's like, I mean, shit, like everyone's playing incredible, right? Like this year is kind of a crazy year for
It is.
individual performances with, it's funny, like the whole Twitter banner the last 2 weeks has been surrounding Stewie and Asia, who's better, who's doing this, which I think is healthy for the sport. I love seeing that. But then Alyssa Thomas is coming out and breaking records, and you're like, well, she might be the MVP. And we've been arguing about these two players, right? And certainly you throw Fee in that category too. So it's such it's just great to see that there's such big time individual performances going on. And there's people that probably traditionally maybe would have been in the running the last couple years that aren't even getting talked about that much anymore, whether it's Satu Sabali or, even a Jewel Lloyd that I know they have to get a few more wins, but just incredible individual performances. Now, what we always talk about is taking everything in stride, right? And never becoming complacent. What we're happy about is the mental aspect of the game. To me, is the most important thing, right? So confidence leads to results, and you only gain confidence from putting in the work and putting in the work in spots that you're going to get to in games. So to your point, the fadeaway for her is her staple, right? We know at any point you get to that fade over your right shoulder, we're going to have a high likelihood of success. And now you build your game around that. And I think a lot of players where they get stuck is they try to do a little bit of everything where they don't really have an identity, right? The way I like to use analogies from other sports, right? Think of a pitcher. If a pitcher's best pitch is a 98 mile per hour fastball, that's the pitch you're probably throwing 65% of the time. And then you start combating that with a changeup and a curveball, but it all looks like the same. So that is something that we always really pride ourselves in, is kind of keeping it simple, right? It's like we don't need Fee to dribble around for 18 seconds of the shot clock. That's never going to be her game. But if you ask me where are we trying to go from here, it's pretty simple. One, I think for her, it's now becoming more of a creator for others. We know she can get her own shot, but that is probably the next step of her progression that we'll probably really lean into this offseason. So that's just a matter of playing more 3-on-3 and 1-on-1 and with other players and just working on those things. But I'm obviously very thrilled with where she's at personally, and I'm glad that the Lynx are also starting to round into form and put some wins together too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question. What do you think of the Lynx so far? Obviously, they had that slow start to the year. They're playing much better now, but kind of we're back around to that 500 mark. What do you think of the team so far, and kind of how they've been able to maneuver the season and kind of turn things around?
Yeah, well, I think it's a testament of obviously the coaching. Cheryl's one of the best, if not the best in the game, but it's also, they had a brand new team again. And I think that when you add two rookies that are playing heavy minutes from Diamond to Dorka, and you also have Tiffany Mitchell that's coming in that's new, you have Lindsay Allen playing increased role, and you had Jess go down for a number of weeks. That's kind of been their identity. It seems like as long as Fee's been with the Lynx, it's like they've been throwing curveball after curveball. But I think they're starting to find their identity, and I think people are falling into where their role should be. With any team, you have to know what is expected of me each night, and I think that's what they were so unsure of out of the gate. And even Fee was a little unsure of how assertive she needs to be. So I think everyone's finding that role, and now they're getting more comfortable playing off one another. So I think what I'm probably most excited about is the steps that, not just Diamond has made. Of course, she was Rookie of the Month this last month. She's been playing great, but even Dorka's been incredible for the team. So and I know they have a draft pick that didn't come over that I'm actually very high on just from watching her highlights. So I think that's something Cheryl has done very, very well. We know Jess was a second round pick too. She's not many second round picks, even late first round picks stick in the WNBA. So, I think they're in a good spot from a foundational standpoint. And then you hope that they can add maybe a few more stars in the off season, or maybe one other really strong draft pick. So, certainly we're excited about the foundation that's built.
Yeah, that's the thing that, like, with this team this year, we haven't really had that, or Minnesota hasn't had that vision the last few years. I mean, obviously during that dynasty era, you knew what team you were going to get every night. Basically from the time maybe, year 2 or year 3 when Fee entered, or when Fee was in the league, it was still kind of Sylvia Fowles at the center of everything that the Lynx were kind of doing, mixing in Fee to that. you didn't really know where they were going to go beyond that. And even last year, it was like, okay, what's this team going to look like moving forward? Where now you have this team, and you're like, okay, we have that foundation built, and you can see where they're planning to go, in the
Yep.
off season and what they could do. So it's a very, I mean, it has to be encouraging, not only as somebody who follows the team, but somebody that's on the team like Fee, just to be a part of that. And obviously, you're going to go through road bumps this year, and that's not fun to go through, but every team has to go through it. And they're still, I think, doing better than people thought this year, which
Oh
is
yeah, for
a
sure.
great sign.
Right.
And
Right.
we can credit you for having Diamond Miller on the team, so that's a good thing. Uh,
But no, I think, like, to your point, and there's also a really important thing here that maybe we don't talk about enough, and it's ownership, right? And I
yes.
think you do hear a lot of complaints around the league that not every owner is invested the way they need to be invested. And I think when you have the Taylor family, and now you have Alex and Mark coming into the fold, who have been now a lot more consistent and open and communicative with Fee and the rest of the team, I think it excites people too, because there's a real, as you said, there's a real blueprint now, right? Like, we know, okay, cool. Like, we know this is set, and now what do we need to fill in, rather than a bunch of question marks where you don't even know where to start. So, and let's face it, everyone is chasing Las Vegas, right? And then you have that next level with New York, who I think is rounding into form too. So it's not a secret of what do you need to compete specifically for the next couple of years. That bar is set, and now
Mhm.
it's, what do you got to do to reach that level?
Yeah. And I mean, the Lynx also do kind of what you mentioned before. They could add a few stars. I mean, there's going to be some names on the market this year that they have money to go try and get.
Yep.
And then, by the time they get all those pieces together, maybe you hope that a team, teams like, Las Vegas and New York, maybe they're starting to descend from their super team era. So
Right.
that, this team could, it's a rebuilding year, but it could be a really quick rebuild, depending on how things shake out. And obviously the way Fee's been playing, Diamond's been playing, Dorca's been playing, their consistency, all three of them. I mean, it's been great, and it's a great, like you said, foundation to build upon. But it'll be interesting off season to see what they do. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season goes, and how those players continue to evolve. And even from the start of the year till now, it's night and day difference of what they've all been able to do, and the chemistry. I think that's the most important thing that they've been able to build. But
Yeah.
you kind of talked about the WNBA and the performances we've had. What I guess, what are your overall thoughts on the overall season? Is it kind of what maybe you thought? I know you're a follower of the game, but is it kind of what you thought coming into the year of what we'd see from teams in the league?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, sure. I think New York probably has has underperformed a little bit, but they have 5 losses or 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, oh my gosh, panic mode. But I think John Quell's playing a lot better now, and I think that is the last piece for them. If she can get back to close to the level she was at with Connecticut, then they can have a real shot at going toe to toe. Then you have the Connecticut Sun, of course, which they've surprised me probably more than anything because of losing John Quell and being that thinner piece. But it's obviously a testament of Alyssa Thomas stepping up. And I think if Washington can get healthy with Elena and get at least 3 healthy weeks with their full squad, I think they can also make some noise. Um, but it's not extremely surprising to me, the teams that have done well as opposed to the teams that don't. But I, like you, I'm probably most curious of how the chips are going to fall this offseason. And I think you're going to see some of these star players that are up for free agency that are kind of on the back nines of their career rather than the front nines. They're probably going to start making decisions based on what do we need to do to compete with those two teams. So I think you're going to see maybe even more top heaviness for the next couple of years. But regardless, I think when you add that with the star power that will be coming into the WNBA, hopefully next year, if not in the next 2 years, it's going to be a pretty exciting build out for the next couple of years for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree that Washington was a team that I thought coming into the year would be kind of maybe in a Connecticut role right now of, being
Right.
that third team. Obviously health is always a big thing with them, and they haven't been able to stay healthy. But um, I mean, Connecticut, even without Bree Jones, like they've been able to do a lot better than I thought they would without her. And you
Right.
mentioned John Quell leaving this off season, or
Right.
last off season, but I
Well,
think that
and
they could be a team too.
yeah, I do too. But and even Atlanta, I think Atlanta's
Right.
probably the most surprising to me,
Hmm.
of where they're at. I figured they would be maybe a little bit lower in the standings, but I probably underestimated Alicia Gray's talent early in the year. I think she's great,
Hmm.
and obviously Ryan Howard is finding her mark, of where she started the season and where she's at now. So that's an exciting team to watch too. So every team, in that top really eight now has an identity, even
Hmm.
with Dallas of, Satu and Enrique, and now Tierra McCowan's been playing really well the last 3 or 4 games. Um, they're kind of a wild card to me too. If they can get into the postseason with a decent seed, they can make some noise.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to see how these teams have formed, but Alicia going from Dallas to Atlanta, but now Dallas is still maintaining. And
Hmm.
I think it's allowed. That's the other thing people don't talk about, right? Like someone leaves a role open, it allows someone else to elevate that role, which has been Satu. And I think Satu is on that brink of being a star, right? Like, or a superstar rather. So it's fun to watch.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think anybody taps Vegas in the end?
Um, no, I mean,
They're
I,
just
I,
so
I
good.
Yeah, I think they're just so deep. And obviously you have the, two-time MVP at the head of the snake, but I think people don't realize just how good Chelsea Gray is,
Right.
right? I know people talk about best point guard in the league. I think she should be up there in the MVP conversation personally because she manages the entire flow and rhythm of the game. She keeps everyone happy. She gets everyone the ball in the spots they need to. Like it's very hard to balance that many scoring people between Jackie, Kelsey, Asia, and then the fact that Chelsea can go average 20 if she wanted to. But
Hmm.
she takes that back seat, but she manages and controls everything. So I think that I haven't heard her name in MVP conversations. I would put her up there with anyone though, just what she does to manage the entire game.
Hmm. She's always a difference maker in the postseason too. She was that way in LA. She's that way in Las Vegas. Like she's always at key moments, she steps up no matter who else is on the team.
Yep.
She's just such a valuable asset, not only throughout the year, but when you need her to step up most, which is what you
Right.
need out of your star players.
Yep.
But I just want to, before we wrap things up, I want to take or kind of jump back to talking about through the lens a little bit. Um, do you, I guess, throughout your career, you kind of talked about the athletes and kind of the personalities that you've dealt with. Do you have maybe a favorite person or people that you dealt with? I know you mentioned Kobe and Gigi. Is that maybe the people that first come to mind to you, or who kind of stands out?
No, I mean, I think everyone has a different
Hmm.
um, personality and what they bring, right? I've gotten lucky to where I can now be selective with who I've worked with,
Hmm.
which is a blessing, of course. But, I've known Trey Young and worked with Trey since he was a senior in high school. So I've seen that entire growth and development as a person, as a father, as a husband. So everyone I've had has had different relationships. I think the one I probably certainly I value the Kobe and Gigi relationship probably the most, especially now that they're gone. Um, but you know, it's weird. Like even Kyrie, I met Kyrie through Kobe when he was leaving Boston. Um, and just as a person, he's one of the best people that I've been around. He's obviously very misunderstood. Um, but he's been so gracious to me, to Napheesa, to the women in the WNBA, and I think he's one of the very few people that, yeah, he'll say it, but he'll actually follow up, right? Like he's put a lot of money into it. Most people don't know even about the growth of women's sports. So he is someone I really admire for that, despite all the noise around him. And then, even Candace Parker, like Candace and I became very tight, when I worked with her when I was living in LA. Um, so she's great. Again, everyone brings so many different elements that I'm pretty thankful for all the relationships. And honestly, I tell everyone that sure, I do work with these people and I've trained these people, but I've learned probably more from them than they've learned from me. And I think that is something I value, that I can now take a little element from everyone and hand that down to the next person coming up. So that is probably the biggest blessing overall when the cumulative effect of all of those individuals has been, unmeasured.
That's one thing a lot of people, this sounds silly, but a lot of people forget that athletes are people, and they're just normal people, but they just happen to be really good at, they're a great athlete. But yeah, I mean, it's that's the thing that, even just being around the WNBA players, they're very open, maybe more so than any other league. But that's one thing you learn quickly is they're just normal people, and they just want to be treated like normal people. So
they do.
I guess what is it like for you to I mean, a lot of people obviously get to see the product on the court or on whatever field of play or whatever it may be that athletes are performing on, but you get to not only, see kind of how their thought process and how they go about things, but you also get to see kind of behind the scenes thing. What's that like for you to kind of, you see all the work that goes into the end product?
Well, I think what I enjoy most is it's consistent problem solving. Everyone has different things that they have. You can kind of see it early before most people see it. And then I just like the adjustment side of things. So specifically in season and in playoffs, you're trying to stay one step ahead of what the defense and the other coaching staff is going to probably do that next game to try to take something away. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of it. And then from an individual standpoint, I think it's just sitting back and watching and learning from how everyone processes the information differently. My number one job is how do we maintain a certain level of confidence? Because once you start losing that, that is when people go in slumps. And that is the reason slumps elongate, is if people start losing that trust in the foundation that's been built. And, as a star, you're just not going to have a great game every single game. And you're going to be the one that probably takes the blame. And that's what happens, right? You get the praise, but you also get the blame. And I think the emotional side of that, not everyone can handle, right? Like I've seen a lot of talented people, even more so talented than some of the people that I've talked about. They just didn't have the mental toughness to be able to sustain or sit into that role. And that is something where when you talk about losing a Sylvia Fowles, you have to have the mental makeup to also fill and step into a certain role. That sometimes is just not in the cards for people, regardless of how talented or skilled or plays that they make. People want to force that upon athletes at times, and sometimes it's just that is the biggest element I think that people don't talk about is that last piece.
Absolutely. Well, Alex, I really appreciate you you jumping on the podcast and talking about everything. It was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule and joining. And wish you the best of luck with Through the Lens, with everything, watching the little one grow, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of the WNBA season and the off season ahead.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the time.
Thank you once again to Alex for joining the podcast this week. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, it was really fun to talk to him and kind of get that behind the scenes look as to what goes into the day-to-day life of an athlete and kind of the training aspect of not only getting their body ready, getting their mind ready, getting their skills honed in, but also just continuing to grow as athletes. And he plays a large part in that, in the training that he does with athletes, not only WNBA athletes. He talks about Candace Parker, Napheesa Collier, obviously, but the NBA athletes that he works with, Kobe Bryant and Gigi. He mentioned working with them. Trae Young, the Carmelo Anthony, and those two co-founding Through the Lens to offer really great content on those training videos, behind the scenes stuff. So a lot of really cool stuff, a different aspect to the podcast that I haven't really had on yet so far. And I'm really thankful to Alex for joining the podcast. And please go check him out on, like I said, on social media. You'll be able to find all of his work. You can find him at Alex Bazzell. That's AlexBazzell on Twitter, or X, I guess we're calling it. But you can find a lot of his work. He plugs his work through the lens, and you can find all of that stuff. So go check it out. I've been watching that stuff nonstop. I'm a junkie for that kind of content and those videos. So a lot of really cool work. And once again, thank you to Alex for joining the podcast and in offering us insight on what he does, through the lens, NBA and WNBA work that he does, and some Lynx stuff. Like I said, Lynx and WNBA behind the scenes on kind of Napheesa Collier, her return to the court, and the work that went into that process. So thanks again, Alex. I really appreciate you joining the podcast this week. I also want to give a shout out to Jeremy Rushing for producing this podcast as he does every week. He does a great job in making this all sound great and making sure that everything's tuned in and kind of sounds great on the back end. So I appreciate Jeremy for all the work that he does. I also want to mention a few things before we wrap up. I want to mention our Patreon page. We did have a patron join this week. Don, thank you, Don, for joining and becoming the latest patron member in our Patreon community. If you want to become a patron, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/hitting the hardwood. There you'll get a lot of exclusive perks. You get early access to podcasts. You get discounts at our Hitting the Hardwood store, which you should check out for a lot of really cool merchandise, Hitting the Hardwood merchandise. There's really anything you can think of. And if there isn't something on there that you would like to purchase, please reach out at hittingthehardwood@gmail.com. I'm happy to listen and kind of create a custom order for you. But like I said, at our Patreon page and our Patreon community, you get a lot of bonus content. I normally do bonus content for those patrons. You get not only our newsletter every Wednesday like everybody else does, but you get bonus newsletters. You get one Monday and Friday as well. So you get Monday, Wednesday, Friday as part of being a patron. But please go check that out. Once again, that's patreon.com/hitting the hardwood. And I want to also give a shout out to our partners, as we do every week, Homage and Better Edge. We'll start with Better Edge. You can go check out betteredge.com, BETTOR edge.com. You can check them out for a lot of betting on the WNBA, any sport you can think of. You can go check them out, and it's a lot of really cool stuff there. If you are a first-time user, please visit betteredge.com/links. When you sign up, use the promo code LYNX, that's LYNX, and you'll get a free $20 in free play. So please go check that out. Just for being a listener of Hitting the Hardwood, you get a free $20 to play with. I'm a regular user, not only with WNBA, but other sports as well. I like being able to do competitions. You can find competitions throughout the year. Follow us on Twitter at Hitting the Hardwood, or at Hitting Hardwood, and you'll be able to kind of be able to bet on whatever you want, and it's really fun. It's really user friendly. So please go check them out. Betteredge.com, BETTOR edge.com. Second one is Homage, as I mentioned. That's HOMAGE.com. At Homage, you'll be able to find a lot of really cool vintage gear, a lot of WNBA gear, logo gear. I have the Lynx hoodie and T-shirt, which I love. I mean, those are probably two of my most worn clothing items that I have, outside of my Hitting the Hardwood clothes and apparel, of course. But I also do have the WNBA, just the main WNBA T-shirt. They're really soft, really comfortable. So please go check them out. Not only just the WNBA gear, but you can get NFL, you can get MLB, you can get NHL, whatever you want, whatever you can think of, you can get at Homage. So please go check them out. Homage.com, HOMAGE.com, and to get a lot of that great vintage gear. With that said, I once again want to thank you for tuning into the podcast this week and for listening every week. I really enjoy bringing this podcast to all of you. I'm excited for some of the guests that we have coming up here in the next couple weeks, and I really enjoy being able to offer different voices and different insight to the WNBA, the Lynx, and being able to provide, Lynx fans or WNBA fans or any fans in general that want to listen, kind of this different avenue to being able to listen to content and to get different insight from different folks. So if you have any suggestions, have any guests that you think should be on the podcast, tweet at us at Hitting Hardwood, as I said, or we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, both of them you can find at Hitting the Hardwood. And let us know who you want to hear. Let us know what we're doing what we can maybe do better. I'm always open to that insight and to get that feedback, so I can continue to produce a podcast and to produce content that you guys want and that you're looking for. So please let us know. You can also email at any time, as I said, hittingthehardwood@gmail.com. Follow me on social media, Mitchell Hansen. That's M_Hansen, HANSEN 13. So that's M_Hansen 13 on Twitter. Feel free to let me know on there. And we'll get some nice guests here coming up, and we'll continue this podcast every week throughout the season. So thank you once again for listening. Let's keep this season rolling. We're already about a dozen games left in the WNBA regular season, which is kind of crazy to think about. Lynx are right in the middle of a playoff race right now. They're in the playoff picture. They're playing much better. Napheesa Collier is back, and I think things are starting to look up for the Lynx. They've had some. They kind of weathered the storm of a rough stretch, actually, really, out of the All-Star break. So they're doing well, and hopefully they can continue that moving forward. But we'll continue to talk about it every week. We'll continue to watch every week, and I once again want to thank you for tuning into another episode. So I will see you all next week, and I hope you have a great week. Enjoy some Lynx basketball, and we will talk to you next Tuesday.
Good.